Good evening, everyone. Good evening to the audience of TDN Radio, and of course, the viewers and listeners of This Week in Interview. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Interview with your host and guide, Anthony Drago. As usual, it's a pleasure to be on with you on a Wednesday night. And tonight, I am extremely like 10 times, 10x my usual excitement because I have my guests tonight are two very young. I'm saying maybe I'm aging myself by saying that they're very young, but they're very young. Um, Professional Dominicans who, every time I see them online, my heart swells because they are standing up for Dominica, which enough of us don't do. As a matter of fact, one of my more popular, I don't know if it's popular, but it brings some consternation when I say that Dominica does not deserve Dominicans. But these two young people are examples, are exceptions to that I would gladly present for that purpose. Today is Earth Day, so happy birthday, planet Earth. And of course, we should be expressing our gratitude to a planet that houses us, so to speak, and in-housing us provides us with fresh air, water, sustenance, traumatic views, huge experiences, makes it possible for us to dream and realize our dreams. And so today, as we um, as we recognize International Earth Day, we should take a pause to let that sink in because this is our home, and so we should be treating it as we should treat our home and not neglect it, not abuse it, be grateful for it, and let that gratefulness not just be in our hearts, but in our actions, because that is what tonight's program is about. I am super lucky to have these two young people available to be with me tonight, Ms. Janelle Brisbane and Mr. Gary Auguste. They are environmentalists, they are conservationists, they're brave and they have strong convictions. But not only that, they took the time to go out and to educate themselves, to grasp knowledge. And when you, as this conversation goes on, you will understand what I mean when I say that they're so articulate. So not only have they accumulated the information, they've proven that they're able to think and to process it and to bring it back to us, uh, in a manner in which we can only describe as being proud of them to do it. Is that, all of us who are parents, we like to see that we send our kids to school and our kids come back and they say, listen to what I heard at school today. Do you know so and so and so? When you look at the moon, it's in that position, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, and you look at your kids with fascination and pride. So that's how I view these two young people who are sitting with us tonight for that conversation. And as you hear me say a lot of times, one of the blessings and privileges in my life is to be the host of this week in interview because I get to have conversations with folks who have accomplished so much that I would probably not normally get to interact with them. So let me tell you a little bit about Janelle. I have a little bio here, so I'll read it. Janelle Brisbane is an interdisciplinary ecologist and conservation advocate from Dominica, Waitukubuli. Pursuing her passion, she obtained a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Ecology from the University of Florida and Masters in Tropical Forest Ecology from the Imperial College of London and is currently pursuing a PhD in ecology at l'Université de Antillers. She returned home following Hurricane Maria to found Wild Dominic, a conservation NGO dedicated to building Caribbean capacity to pursue scientifically and traditionally sound conservation action, emphasizing the inclusion of local people in the design and implementation of programs. Recognized as a National Geographic Explorer, her work spans population monitoring, livelihood development, public education, and advocating for the rights of nature, the rights of nature, right? Which is right in tune with what we're talking about. Earth Day. Earth has rights. So we'll go along that route and explore that a little bit. She has become a vocal champion for people and place, fighting for the rights of communities at home while building inter-island relationships and knowledge sharing networks that Caribbean conservation has long needed. Janelle, where did you have time to do all of that in your young? We'll get to Gary, but I just want to, as the folks are learning about you, I want to give you the opportunity to also introduce yourself, and maybe there is something else that you want to say about yourself. Go ahead.
No, I think that pretty much sums it up, Anthony. Thank you for reading that out. Thank you for the introduction. I guess when you're young, you have the energy and think you can do it all at once, and as you grow older, you realize, you need to prioritize and focus. But yeah, my main focus has transformed into the human dimension side of conservation. Initially you get into it thinking that you just want to hug trees and work with wildlife, but you end up realizing that nature doesn't need managing, people need managing, and it's all about building that foundation again for us to learn how to respect Mother Nature like we once did, to draw on that traditional ancestral knowledge and to understand that all beings have rights and all of us deserve to be here. It's not just only humans that are Dominicans.
Not only humans that are Dominicans are very, very interested. My other guest tonight is Mr. Gary Ogis. He is of Kalinago descent. He's a Kalinago, let's say that. A conservation biologist dedicated to protecting biodiversity and promoting environmental stewardship. So as Giselle said, Janelle, I'm sorry, said, people need managing. So that stewardship plays into that. He recently graduated from University of the West Indies, Kerrville campus with a Master's of Philosophy in Biology. Gary's work focuses on bridging scientific research with practical conservation action, with a strong emphasis on conservation awareness and outreach. So, Gary, welcome as well to this week in interview. It's great having you. Tell us also about your passion a little bit more.
Thank you for having me. I heard Janelle's bio. And I was like, ooh, I forgot
Ooh.
Janelle did all that. But yeah, it's good to have Janelle as a friend, as a colleague. She's an inspiration as well. But in like my passion is in conservation as well. That's what I did my master's in, and hopefully one day I could go for the big PhD. But right now, a lot of my focus, coming out from my master's degree, is the outreach aspect of it, because I realize there's power in education and there's power in educating the public, and so a big part of why I was doing my master's degree is that I also have a hobby, which is like video editing, and learning how to do research and learning to do video editing could bridge a gap in outreach that we need in the conservation space. So this whole campaign ignited when I started uploading videos, and I could see the impact it had. And I'm glad that we're getting so much support right now. But that's sort of my passion right now, to sort of bridge the gap between science and the people. But also, I also have a passion for research. I'm curious about plants, curious about animals and birds and such like that, and as well as snakes.
As well as snakes. I think the snake part of it is so important because we grew up in Dominica for culture that if you see a snake, you cannot leave
Mhm.
it alive. You have to kill it. You know, like you see a snake on the road and a car they will drive over the snake and they reverse and they drive over it again and they reverse. And even after it's dead, they will continue to kill it because people just have that innate, I don't know if it's innate, but it's a cultural fear.
Yeah.
There's such a stigma attached to snakes. So that there is a great way to start. Although I know what draws the attention right now is what's happening to Debonche, but I want to approach it from an angle of understanding the value of what we have, and if we understand that value, maybe scenarios like Debonche will not occur in the first place, right? We will not be perfect, but if we understand that there's nothing wrong in allowing, if you don't want to touch it, don't touch it, allow it to cross the road because it has its place in that whole ecosystem. And so when we say that we're Dominicans, I always ask people, what does when you say you're a Dominican, what does it mean? What in your identity, what portion of your identity is Dominican? Um, and I guess a lot of times we don't think about that. But if somebody say, well, what about Dominica you're proud of? Well, Dominica is so green. We have a lot of water. We have mountains. We're beautiful, and so on. But from a scientific point of view, as well as you can mix the emotion and passion, I want you to lay the case for the treasure that Dominica has, the how valuable are our mountains. Well, the river should be obvious because we drink water, so
Mm-hmm.
hopefully that's obvious. But sometimes it appears like we don't recognize that. But the value that just our mountains have, our forests, our rivers, the soil, and those are the things that we see that are obvious. But then there's so much else in there that we don't just see from a cursory look. So I want both of you guys to spend a couple of minutes and just lay in the case for why the nature, the natural setting is valuable in and of its own self. I know which one of you want to go first. Ladies first.
Sure, Janelle could fire away.
Okay.
Okay, I can go
Follow.
first. I'm gonna start by defending my snake family. Yes. We always say that Dominicans kill snakes and it is a cultural thing that we do. That's not true.
Mm-mm.
That's something that has been taught, and religion has a lot to blame with that. If we go back to the first people who were here in Dominica, if we go back to our Kalinago culture, the Great Spirit is a snake. It's a
Mm.
serpent. The
Wow.
founding father of our island is a snake, and that snake was the most revered, one of the most powerful images that we had in our culture. That snake is who helped us fight off the colonizers for so long and remain green and keep our people safe, both the Kalanagos and the Negmawas in the mountains. That's what we believed. So it's Dominica does not have a tradition or a culture of killing snakes. We use that as an excuse
Mm.
to do something that we should not be doing. You know, we always revert to culture as just like this justification for wrongdoing, and I think it's high time that we stop doing that and we start asking the question as to why do we have this behavior, and who is it benefiting? Because like you said, snakes play a very important role. I would rather have a snake in my yard than have rats and risk myself getting leptospirosis
Mm.
or spoiling my crops or so many other things, you know. um there are farmers here who intentionally release those snakes onto their yard to be able to keep the rats and the agouti and the manuka at bay to help them with their yield, their crops.
Mm.
But when it comes to the value of Dominica overall, like you said, you know, when you think of what makes us Dominica, what is it to be Dominican? We think of our greenery, we think of our water, and that's because we have the history of being one of the last islands to be colonized. And because we were one of the last islands to be colonized, Dominica has kept a lot of the fauna and flora that so many other islands have lost. A few years ago, we actually had to send iguanas from Dominica. We had to fly them over to Anguilla to be able to save their population because our we share the same species, and the iguanas almost went extinct in Anguilla. They needed help, and Dominica had the last large population that, you know, seemed healthy and viable enough. that they called on us and they were like, "Hey, Dominica, we need help." And I mean, it's not just for the iguanas. We're the only country left in the world where mountain chickens can still be found in the wild. It's been wiped out of every single island. We have two endemic parrots. There are only two islands in the Caribbean with two endemic parrots, and that's Dominica and Jamaica. We are blessed with an abundance of minerals and fresh water. Look at what is happening to St. Lucia, how they have to call on Dominica for water. Antigua as well. So, I mean, other islands are relying on Dominica's crops and water source, and there are countries in the world who are about to go to war over water and other resources. Like we are so blessed with what we have, and we need to understand and appreciate it's not just one river, it's not just one mountain. The conversation always starts like that. Oh, it's just one river, it's just one mountain, and then all of a sudden we end up in war because all of our water sources are poisoned, and water is essential for life. We can't think of ourselves as separate from nature. We need nature to survive. We are animals, we eat, sleep, shelter, breathe. If we do not have healthy soils, if we do not have healthy water, if we do not have the materials to be able to safely shelter and eat and get our medicine, then what is life? What is the quality of life? And what's the quality of our future going to be?
Awesome. Gary, go ahead. Same scenario.
Wow. Okay. Janelle took all my answers. I must say.
So now you have to drink deeper. Eh?
Yeah, yeah. But that was a great answer. Really summed it up. You could hear the passion she has for snakes. But before you asked that question, you asked like we who are we as Dominicans.
Yeah.
I just want to say happy Earth Day to Whitey Kubuli. Tall is her body. That was the first name given to us by the indigenous people who inhabited Dominica, and they named Dominica rightfully so. Tall is her body. We're so mountainous. We have the highest density of volcanoes of any island in the island chain. And with that, we have an abundance of water. Our forest has remained intact for so many years. And I think that's what's so precious about Dominica is our natural resources. And as Gina was saying, there's so many other countries who have exhausted their natural resources and now are hoping to return to what Dominica is today. Many people visit Dominica for that exact reason because their country has been depleted so much. There's so many people who come to Dominica and it's like, wow, this place smells. I can't explain it, but it smells green. I'm like, well, it's the
Green is a
forest.
color, right?
Yeah, it's like they're not used to that. And it clears their sinuses. They're happy to be here. It's like, I can't believe you can just drink from the river or the streams. And that's what we want to continue happening to Dominica, that all rivers and our streams are safe enough that people can continue drinking from them, that our mountains are protected, that our protected lands are actually protected. That's one of the things that we're standing for as conservationists, because these areas have been marked out and mapped out for that specific reason to preserve our natural resources. And yet we're seeing they are being ignored, that these laws are being ignored. And so that's sort of what really ignited this campaign that we're doing. Is that was one of the first things that we noticed, like, hey, I think they're going in the Northern Forest Reserve. And that I think turned into like, I know they are, and turned into, oh, we have proof that they are. So it's all this came about because we have gotten support along the way. And the support has come from people who wants to preserve Dominica, wants the best for Dominica. And I think we're all conservationists at heart, deep down. Janelle and I are doing it as a career, but I'm sure everybody wants to conserve Dominica's natural resources as much as we do.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously the answers are there, but folks, like you said, we say it was just another river. We have 300 or more. Or it's just a mountain. Everywhere you go in Dominica is mountain. So what if you break down a hill? I mean, you actually have people expressing that ignorance. I'll call it for what it is, on live, on Facebook and other media.
Mm-hmm.
And apart from, I mean, do they really understand what they're saying? What river? Some of them say F the river. What river? We have more. And and I don't even really want to talk about the airport project, because if by now somebody still thinks that what's going on in Debranche, in terms of the defenders of Debranche, have anything against the international airport, they can keep that thought in their head.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it has to be malice that has anybody thinking that what's going on in Debranche is a sort of protest against the international airport. I mean, I have my own concerns about the international airport. I think what we're giving up in terms of destruction of the forest and whatever is not worth, quote unquote, an international airport. But that is my personal opinion. And I have never been to the Day Branch protest, but that is completely separate from what is happening. You know, maybe we can break this up into a few parts. Uh, because thanks to the education that you guys do along with Wave, big up Margot and all the other folks at Wave who really are keeping this thing alive. And you see Henry Shillingford and Nasio and some other folks on there that I don't necessarily recognize. So if I don't call your name, don't think I don't appreciate you. But but we see, and what I admire most is that they're doing it lonely. I mean, it's pretty easy to support a movement when it's popular and there's 100 people there. But sometimes you see the video, there are 2 people, there's 5 people, but passionate enough people that now we're getting a groundswell of support, and we're forcing the authorities to try to explain, and they are falling over themselves in trying to explain. I mean, if someone just listens to the stories that they give to defend and to explain, I mean, that alone is enough to convince anyone that that whatever is going on should stop. At, at the very least, stop until we can bring it into our laws and our processes. I happen to be, um, my career is in construction, on major projects, so I understand the permitting process. I understand the process that has to go through when you're sourcing aggregate for a particular site. You have to bring samples, you have to test them in the lab. You basically have to prove that that the source is appropriate. That's even not having to do anything in the environment. So to see that level of work and destruction happening even before that that has happened, um, is mind blowing. So I'm going to give you guys the opportunity, to talk about the, how you say, the regulatory violations that's happening, um, a- and just talk about the amount of destruction that has already happened. Gary, by the way, I want to say that you're an amazing, videographer. Is that what you call yourself? But I mean, I have all your video. By the way, I have all of Gary's videos on my webpage. So if you
Okay.
want to see what
Oh,
I'm talking about, go on there
fantastic.
and you can
Thank you.
see those videos. I mean, he just breaks it down and he has the background data and information that gives support to what he's saying. But let's spend a little bit of time and talk about the regulatory framework, that's supposed to happen. Let's assume for a moment that this is really a project to mine, um, aggregate and other stuff for a project, whatever that project is. Let's talk about the regulatory framework as well as the what should go into before the first piece of equipment, before somebody even
Yeah.
agrees to spend a
Right. Right.
dollar, that this is a viable project.
Right. Right. Okay. I think I'll start off.
Mhm.
Thank you for that, for sharing my videos, and I appreciate the compliment. I try to do my best to edit them as clean and as clear as possible.
You're doing an awesome job with them.
I want to ensure that there's captions and subtitles, so even people who don't understand my accent, if you can read English, they would follow along.
Hmm.
Um, the videos that we produce are nothing that we can not prove. we are ensuring that everything is fact-based on what we're producing, and you can see from the reaction that people are sharing it, and it's a very good conversation starter, that's for
Hmm.
sure. I've met a lot of people in the streets and about saying they like my videos and didn't understand that until we gave a breakdown, because we understand we're in the digital age and not everybody is going to listen to a 2 hour video. Not many people going to actually listen to this as much as people want to see like a short form content. And I think that's what really got people's attention. We're in this TikTok age, we're in this AI age. Everything is fast paced, fast paced. And I think the developers for this project just want to follow the ride. They want to go fast paced, fast paced. They want to go over certain certain rules that are put in place to ensure that projects in Dominica are done correctly. The first thing, when it started, we began noticing that there was excavation work more in September. We initially thought it was some guy, some farmer, maybe making an access road to get to his farm because the place was used for agriculture in the past, and took nothing from it until we started seeing a lot of big trucks come in, a lot of excavators come in, and I, being from the community 10 minutes away, was asking questions. I'm like, what's going on up there? Why is there so many big trucks? Is there a project going? And nobody from the community could answer. And it's when I was on a bus ride going to Roseau and we passed the site that a guy on the bus said, "Oh, they probably digging for minerals, they're probably digging for copper." And I was like, "What? That can't be true. That's not true. I didn't know Dominica had those materials." And being from a science background and still doing my research at the time, I was like, you know what? Let me just look into this. There has to be some truth to it. And that's when I actually found a paper which talks about the copper mining in the late 1990s and how it stopped and the economic value that would have gone through it, and that Dominica almost gave up 12% of the country just so a company,
12%.
yes, 12%, just so a foreign company could come and mine copper in Dominica. The entire East Coast would have been gone. And that's when I was like, I have to publish something about it. I have to write about it because I don't know about it. No one in my generation knows about it, and I live just 10 minutes away. Clearly, these are stories that we are not told about, or we probably should be telling in our education system. Like, these are some of the triumphs that we've had. We protected the nature island from these foreigners who come try to exploit our resources. And I thought the first video was really good in summarizing that. And in it, we did not say anything that's going on currently. We just ensured that we gave the history
Right.
and let everybody come to like their own conclusions. And from that, we got a lot of feedback from people. People started reaching out like, hey, they heard this, they heard that. And that really started getting meetings started happening. We ended up having 4 meetings with the environmental engineer from MMC, and we started having this public consultation in November. However, excavation started way before that.
Right.
And for any project to this scale, they have to do what we call the ESIA. And the ESIA has to be submitted, it has to be approved. And when we're at these meetings in November, and this is after the retaining wall has already started being constructed, they have removed acres of forest and topsoil and have dumped it near the river, and it's causing pollution every day for weeks, no, for months. And that is when the engineer is coming and telling the community that, hey, we're doing this, and this is for the airport, we're digging for stone aggregate. And it's like, why are you coming right now after you've done so much damage to the community? Nobody was informed about it. And these trucks are driving up and down the road, they're causing mud, causing dust, they are disturbing the primary school that's right near the highway. Teachers talked about their worry that students might go on the road and might get hit or something like that because the trucks are so big that they make the schools tremble.
Hmm.
All this is happening, and we finally get to talk to them in November. So that's one of the biggest things that we realized, is that they did not seem to care about the community. If it's only now they decide to talk to us. And from our investigation, we found out that they actually made an application in April, and the handing over of the land. However, in those application documents, the size of the site is just acres. There's no figure to the site.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if
So it's like a blank check.
yeah, and you said you have a background in construction, so I don't know if you're able to build houses and write just acres on the form and agree.
Yeah, square feet. Yeah.
It's
Wow. But it's almost as if somebody is saying, let's go and do as much as we can before they stop us, because it's easier to say sorry than to ask for permission. It almost sounds like that. And I mean, on a personal basis, that is bad enough. But when you think about it as a nation, that's unbelievable. So Janelle, when somebody goes in and they go in with a excavator and a bulldozer, and they're stripping away trees and soil cover, all of what we are losing. I mean, things that we don't even know exist. All of, talk to us about all of what is being disturbed besides just the soil and the trees that we see, but everything else.
Yeah, so Anthony, it's exactly like what you said. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. And when we had put out the audio clipping of the PS of housing, who's responsible for physical planning, that's Reginald Sabra. He literally said that, you know, the permission was this: proceed, we hand you over the site, and the only issue in the whole illegal operation of what is Dewash currently is that the public was not aware. Nothing else mattered. They simply handed them over the site and told them to proceed without any proper documentation, without any consultation, without any permission. And the only issue is that they were caught without first notifying the public. But when it comes to Deboash is a very geological and ecological and hydrologically rich site too. I mean, it's at the headwaters of the Pegua River. It's one of the largest rivers in Dominica, especially on the eastern side of Dominica. It's the largest river that serves in our indigenous community, our Kalinago community. So just that fact in itself makes it one of the most important places to protect, because if something happens in Dewash that affects the river and it's at the headwaters, that entire Pegua River is contaminated. That entire Pegua River is affected with what is happening up there. When it comes to geology, we had an independent geologist come and tell us like what is this site? You know, why is everyone so interested in this area? And we actually did find that the rocks are rich in sulfides, and sulfides are in layman's term, fool's gold, right? It looks like gold's in the rock, but it's not gold. But what it does is indicate mineral deposits, and that's why people would have piqued their interest around Dewash, and would have gone into tests like, okay, is it copper? Is it gold? Is it iron? Like, what is below the surface here? But what happens when you excavate that site with all these rocks that are filled with sulfides? Sulfides are trapped underground in the rocks.
Mm-hmm.
You excavate it, it suddenly becomes exposed to air and water, and so it oxidizes and produces sulfuric acid. And what happens in that process is that the soil and the rocks start leaching heavy metals. So this is where our concern with arsenic and mercury and lead and a bunch of other toxic heavy metals are coming into play, and why we are seeing in their own ESIA reports, after they had started excavating the site, they reported high levels of mercury and arsenic like hundreds of times above the safe drinking water levels according to the WHO standards, right?
Yep.
So when we're not just, you know, advocating because we want to see trees in a place, we're advocating because a healthy environment is a basic human right. We have a basic human right to clean water, clean air, and to a clean surrounding. Gary in his research found that Dewash is one of the most rich places for our parrots. It's one of the most densely populated valleys for our parrots, our own endemic parrots found nowhere else in Dominica. The thing that's in the center of our flag, our parrots, as well as a number of other endemic species. There's also rare palms and so on in that area. So when you clear out a place that was protected for a reason, we need to ask ourselves, why did we fight so hard to protect this land? Why does this protected area exist? What is it protecting? And when we clear out that area, what are we standing to lose?
Right. And so, apart from people like me who just like to see the environment be left alone, you're saying that you're actually posing a threat to the people,
Yes.
including our Kalinago people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kalanago and Marigot.
and Marigot.
But also, like Gary would attest to, and many Dominicans, that the Pegua River, the Concord River, is frequented by many Dominicans. There are even tourist
That's,
operations along that area going
yeah.
into the water, right? So it's not just the Kalanago and the Marigot side of the river, it's Dominica as a whole. Also, when you contaminate the water in one place, we're a small island that eventually goes into our groundwater, and we're facing issues across the island for that. You know, like it's a much bigger picture than a few trees are coming down.
Yeah, and a few as part of my duties as host, I interview some folks from the Cancer Society and those things, and understanding that, I mean, it's a couple of years now, but we were having upwards of 300 and 400 people a year dying from cancer, and so when I whittle it down, there's that if you have 52 weeks in a year, you had at that time you had 2 or 3 people dying a week on average from cancer. So can you imagine that in a community of Dominica where every week 2 or 3 people are dying from cancer, and now we are taking action that's going to release even more poison and more carcinogen into the water that so many people depend on, because there's no substitute for water. And in Dominica, we've been so spoiled that our water looks clear, we drink it. So now it has to be like a whole other re-education of people to say, be careful, guys. Not because the water is clear, there will be stuff in that water that's poison. You know, and
Yeah.
so Gary, one of the things that stuck with me in one of your videos is when you on your map you did an outline of the area of excavation, and that was early. So I suspect it's even bigger now. And you showed that it was pretty much the size of Roseau,
Uh,
what they had excavated. I don't know if you. I think that was probably in your second video, I think.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Talk about the scale of what is happening, because folks, yeah, oh, it's a mountain. This guy's up in the bush doing whatever. We get hurricanes. The trees are growing to grow back. Um, People don't understand that when you prolong all the trees, you might see it green, but it's zebgwa and zekuto and those things that's growing is bush, that is shrubs that's growing, and years before the trees come back. But talk about the scale um, of what is happening in Dominica.
Okay, okay, I could do that. Yes, that was very early on. That was actually from the second video.
Yeah,
The second video came out in November, I think, near the end of November. But this video came about after we had meetings with the environmental engineer. He had some community meetings, two in Concord and two in Marigot. We attended two in Concord and we attended one in Marigot. And so from those meetings, that's how I was able to construct that video based off the information we got from the engineer. Also keep in mind the engineer is also working with MMC and CR5. So there's a complete um, what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
Conflict of interest,
Conflict
all
of
kind of
interest.
stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the word. It's a complete conflict of interest because he's the one writing the ESIA, but he's also employed by the developers. So that's not right.
The
That's not
person
possible.
doing the ESIA is employed by the people looking for permission to do the project.
Yes, that's what's happening. And we brought it up to him and was like, hey, there's a conflict of interest. And he was like, well, Dominica doesn't have all that capacity. And so sometimes these things happen that for projects to continue in Dominica, which I found pretty absurd. Like, even if Dominica doesn't have those environmental engineers, we could also seek for one outside of Dominica. But going back to the map, um, at those meetings, the engineer showed he basically had a PowerPoint presentation with a few pages, but Janelle and I and many others came with a lot of questions beforehand because we're like, hey, this is going on, and we have all these follow-up questions for you. And we basically got to like page 3 or 4 in a 3 hour meeting because we had so many questions that we didn't really get for the presentation on the first day. And so on the first day, he kind of skimmed through his presentation and we stopped on a map. And then we asked him, like, okay, so what is this map? And he said, well, this is the area that they're going to excavate. And we clarified with him, we made sure that we asked him again. He's like, you sure? Um, I don't think he was aware that I know the area. Like, I've actually hiked through that area and I've gone to one of those peaks on that map for our park service. So I was aware of how far that is. And we took the coordinate points and we took a picture of it. And he told us, well, that entire area is 80 acres. And I was like, I don't think it's 80 acres. And so I went and we plotted it by using the images and knowing the coordinate points of how far it is and the proximity to the rivers and to the road. We made a rough estimate that it's around 160 acres. I had other people try to do it as well, and they came to the same
Twice the
conclusion.
size.
So it's like it's double the size that they're saying, which was 80 acres. And to try to get people to understand how massive this was, I actually made a cutout to scale to a map. I have a big map of Dominica. A map was made in 1991, and I actually put it over Rosa. And I was like, "Oh, this is a very good. Like, I could show this just so people can understand, because some people can't comprehend 160 acres, and that's massive." And we and coming back to the applications that they sent in, remember I said that there was no number on the application, it was just only acres. We saw further down where they had a next application in December 12th, I think it was, but it was after the stop order. The stop order was issued on December 1st, and so they sent in the next application after the stop order. And you can see in the section for the area of the size, there is 80 acres, but it's scratched out. They scratched out 80 acres and they put a smaller figure. I don't remember it, Janelle. I think it was like 5 point something.
What, 5 point something
Well,
acre?
it's they're going for 26 acres now.
26 acres.
Yeah,
So seven-ish acres of private land and 19-ish acres of public land.
yeah. But like from that, like they deliberately like removed the 80 acres with a pen and wrote over it, and to give a smaller sum after the stop order was issued. So I think they went back to the drawing board and was like, okay, we can't really excavate this whole 80 acres. And I was trying to explain to the environmental engineer how I came to that number. And when trying to explain to him, I told him, well, I use GIS. And if anybody use GIS, they could understand. He was like, well, he doesn't know how to use GIS. I was like, what do you mean you don't know how to use GIS? And me not knowing too well what an environmental engineer does, I'm like, okay, sounds a bit absurd. Like I do it. I'm not an environmental engineer, but just my master's and my bachelor's program, we dabble in GIS, and based on what career you take, you get more complex into it. And so a lot of people have something in GIS, and he said he doesn't, someone else does it for him. And I really wanted to know who did those maps. And when we got the ESIAs months after, we only saw one name in those documents. The only name is the environmental engineer who's been at those meetings. Um, there's lists of different experts who help compile the ESIAs. I think there's 5 experts, and it only gives the description of what the expert is: an expert in forestry, an expert in I think soil, but it doesn't say any name, any specific name who contributed to writing these documents. And there's only one name on it, and it's the environmental engineer.
Now, for those of you who may not necessarily know, ESIA is Environmental
Environmental
Social
social impact assessment.
Impact Assessment. So
Yeah.
essentially, if you're going to do a project, you have to, when you're applying for permission to do a project, you have to tell the person that you're applying for permission from, I studied what I'm going to do, and this is the impact it's going to have on the environment. This is the impact, this is the social impact that it's going to have. So if it's going to be noisy, or if there's going to be a lot of traffic, if there's going to be a lot of excavation that's going to cause tremors that might crack people's homes, those kind of things. But when you do a complex project like a forest, where you might have parrots habitats, you might have iguanas, you might have snakes, you might have all of those things, you have to also be able to go in there and give an assessment of the various species that you're going to be affected. I mean, our forests are tropical forests, tropical rainforest, and we know a lot of medicine are discovered from plants that are taken from indigenous forests. We don't know what we will be losing. We're not given the chance to know and to make a decision because we don't know what flora and fauna, what plants and animals are in there, and what we would be losing. I can tell you, I do projects in the U.S., and sometimes for us to get permission to use a site, we have to recreate a similar site somewhere else. Like one time we were doing a water project, and it was going through some wetlands. We had to recreate an equivalent amount of wetlands away from the site before we could get permission to do anything in that space. I did another project where in the middle of the project, we found out that there was a Native American burial site there, and
Oh,
everything had to stop until we could get an expert in that field to come and to relocate um, whatever, in a dignified way, because again the project was ongoing, and they had to consult with the various people who most likely were the peoples who were buried there, get permission for them to move the remains and to do all that. um, oh, we get rain and we get washout, and after every rain somebody comes to visit our sites to make sure that we have whatever protection we have for runoff that goes into the waterways um, is intact. I had to bring a vacuum truck on site one time to suck out debris from an area because we had rain. One of our defenses failed, and we had infiltration of debris. We had to bring a vacuum truck in to suck it out and take it out. Um, and so when I see those things happen in Dominica, which is a lot. We have a lot less. We only have 300 acres, and I'm in a land where there is thousands of times that quantity, and you see the value that they place on it, and we see how just flippantly we deal with what we have in Dominica, while with our mouths we are professing that we love the land. Our coat of arms, and it says, "After God is the earth." I
mm,
mean, and so if we're treating the earth that way, we're pretty close to scratching out God's eyes, because you know that's just how it is. So I don't know which one of you guys are more familiar with it, but I know the forest reserves were established. We have three forest reserves, and for a while there, that was sacred. Violating and encroaching into the forest reserves was considered major in Dominica. And I know I have seen on a couple of the videos that we are really close or even have already encroached on it. So can you guys give a background on the rationale behind establishing the forest reserves and what's happening in this project vis-a-vis those reserves? Gina, I don't know if you want to take it because Gary spoke, or both of you guys, either one, your team anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can go ahead with this one. So we actually have two northern forest reserves. It's three national parks.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so it's the northern and the central forest reserve. They're right next to each other. Actually, Daywash is kind of like the corner of both of them.
Mm.
And it's not that they're pretty close to encroaching. They're actually inside the northern forest reserve.
They
They've
have
already
they have
encroached.
already encroached. Uh-huh.
They've already encroached, and the only reason why they haven't taken more land is because we managed to get them to put a stop order in place with, I mean, especially with Gary's videos, putting enough pressure and going to the meetings and with a physical map. We actually went to the meetings with Gary's very large map of Dominica and was like, look at the boundaries, you're inside.
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, they
That,
didn't want
that,
to believe us.
yeah,
So,
that was very alarming the first meeting we went to, because we were explaining to the engineer that he and his group, they have encroached on the Northern Forest Reserve, and he's like, no, we are near the central. I'm like, no, you're in the northern. It's like, no, we're near the central. And we're like, do I have to show you a map? And we showed him the map, and he was like, that's not the map. It's not the map. He said that he got advice from senior officers from the forestry division. I was like, oh, okay, well then that's alarming if the foresters are getting this wrong. So either you are wrong or you're throwing them under the bus, which I hope that all foresters knows the national park boundaries. I don't want to believe that they don't know it. So I think he was throwing them under the bus for that, for him not knowing. And it took the second meeting where an actual retired forestry officer came to that meeting, and he was like, "Yeah, young man, you guys are encroaching on the north, and the central is close by, but you guys are not working across the river, because the river, when you go across the river, you're gonna get to the central." And speaking of the river, Debrush, those who don't know, it's called Debrush because there's two rivers, two branches that converge to create the Pegua Concord River. And the engineer for one of those branches was the boundary. And so him and his guys actually taking piece of that ridge, of the mountain. They were saying like they're not nowhere near the boundary, because the boundary is the river. It's like, no, the boundary is the ridge. It has never been the river. And so just from the first meeting, we're like, okay, they are getting information so wrong, and we're just 5 minutes into this meeting.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, continue, Janelle. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
you're good. Um, Yeah, but like Gary was saying, you can hear me okay? Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Yes,
uh-huh.
yes, yeah.
Like Gary was saying, he didn't want to believe our map. He actually came with multiple excuses. So he presented a false map of Dominica, that we told him was false, and we actually back searched it. It came from a very unreliable source. But he showed us that map because it would have proved that they are away from the Northern Forest Reserve versus the official map that clearly shows they're inside. And then actually at the site visit in January, where the Ministry of Environment was there with forestry and so on, they made it very clear that there's already encroachment. Lands and surveys had to go in and remark the boundaries, put back the pins in the ground, the trig points, because they actually dug up some of their markers.
Wow.
So yeah, they're very much so inside. And when they originally proposed 160 acres, about 80 acres, so half of their original proposal was landing right inside of our Northern Forest Reserve, and they acted like they really could not give a care when we told them this is the boundary. Then they changed the story to the river, and then thankfully Forestry and Lands and Survey stepped in to actually prove that. But so the Northern Forest Reserve is where they've encroached. It's the larger of the two forest reserves, so the central is nearby. But the whole point of the Northern Forest Reserve, it was created as a conservation site to protect the headwaters of Dominica's main watersheds. So inside of the Northern Forest Reserve, you find the headwaters for places like Pegua, Londonderry, Layu, the Picard River, a number of major riverways, and a number of water catchment areas. So this is where our drinking water is coming from for so many communities, right in the headwaters, right in that Northern Forest Reserve. A part of it was taken away from the Northern Forest Reserve to create the Mon Diablotin National Park, because the Mon Diablotin National Park and the Northern Forest Reserve together make up the only place in the world where you can find our Sisteru parrot. So in addition to it being a protected area for our waterways, to protect our waterways, and it's not to say that you can't use the site, right? Because we don't believe in fortress conservation where it's like, oh, these are protected lands, no one can go in there. No, people need to exist. We need to be a part of nature. It's reducing the activities. So you can do selective logging with permits. You can do hunting inside of our forest reserve during the season, but what you cannot do is put farms or communities in the headwaters that release a bunch of chemicals into our headwaters, right? So it's very specific on, dumping a bunch of waste material into our waterways, or chemicals that poison our soil, or doing things that harm our fauna and flora. Like it's essentially a reserve. Like protecting this site allows it to like when we use outside of that area, that like we're still going to have the wildlife, we're still going to have the fauna and flora, because these are the seed banks, or these are the nursing grounds for our wildlife, and then they're able to move from there.
Wow. So, I really want to stay there a little bit because we're saying that the reason for the Northern Forest Reserve and the
Mondiality National Park.
Mondial National
Yeah.
Park is because at that point, and you mentioned some rivers. I don't know folks who are not Dominican, but most of my audience are. You talk about Picard River, which is in Portsmouth. You talk about Layo River, which is like our biggest river. That's coming down the west coast, and then you go across and talk about Londonderry, and so on in Marigot area. So, I mean, and if we're talking about an area where there is, as you said, hydrogen sulfide, which can cause acid rain and cause leaching into the rivers, we're talking about potentially contaminating almost all of our rivers. So, folks, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that debauch by itself and contaminating the Concord Pegua River is bad enough. But what we're saying is that if you guys did not step in, especially these guys have no idea where they are. It looks, or they don't care where they are. So they are in the forest reserve and not admitting that they are, and they're being allowed to just do what they want. Basically, if you guys did not step in and raise the alarm, we could see contamination of all of those waterways. And as I said before, in Dominica we spoil. When last time I was in Dominica, I went into the river in Pocasset, walked up the river and drank water from the river. Because there's a nice little river in there, there's a little waterfall and stuff like that. So somebody could be doing that by Picard, totally not understanding that what's happening in Debranche can affect the water in Picard because this is a shared catchment area. So I hope that people are grasping the seriousness of what is happening. And again, it comes back to where we started, that if the laws were followed, if somebody had submitted for proper planning permission and had waited like all other Dominicans wait to get a yes or go ahead, most of those things would have been examined, they would have been interrogated, and I'm not saying that the project would not have been allowed, but it would have been allowed under controlled circumstances, and mitigating action could have been put in place. So where do we go from there? I know it's still a struggle. Um, well, I mean, you guys are at the tip of the spear. So where can people like me step in to assist? People like in the audience. Um, what should be our next steps?
Um,
Gary, you want to go first?
Um, our next steps. Well, right now there's still a lot of information that we don't know yet.
Hmm.
The ESIAs. I'm not sure if you got a chance to read them. If you haven't, we have a link. We could send it to you. But the
Okay.
ESIAs, to put it, summarize it, were not good. We saw a lot of data from other projects inputted inside the ESIA. So like one ESIA was basically 3 or 4 projects fitting into one, and we know this because they didn't even bother to remove the project code on it. So you see in a cement batching plant, and then you see other data such as the biodiversity of the area. And Janelle and I, as ecologists, we're looking at it like I don't think I've ever seen an abolo or a ground lizard in the rainforest area. These are animals you'd see more near the coast where it's warmer, or in the community areas. You're going to expect to see a bola there. You're not going to see one in the rainforest, especially an area like Debash where it has so much water and it's very cold. These animals won't be there, and we're seeing that in their biodiversity report. Um, Stuff like that. We actually saw that in, I think it was the noise assessment. So the noise of what the blast would occur, like how far does it happen? And they have GPS coordinates. So I was like, let me just plot it. And when I plot it, the actual points show on the map is actually in Crapo Hall, which those of you don't know, Crapo Hall is in Pegua Bay, or is it in, it's in Harton Garden,
Hmm.
which is miles away from the site. And when we looked, and the Crapo Hall ESA is also available as well, during that short period of time that we got a chance to look at it. So we have the Crapo Hall ESA as well. So we looked into it and we saw the exact same section of the noise and everything. They just copy and paste the same table into the Stonefield Debois ESIA. The only thing they changed was who calibrated it. So someone calibrated the noise level in for Crapo Hall. I don't remember his name, but this was done like years ago. But the new updated one for Stonefield, they didn't even bother to change any numbers in the table. They just completely copy paste and just change whoever calibrated it. And the calibrator is the environmental engineer as well. And so just looking at that, the information, the ESA is not done well. It's not only us who are saying that. Physical Planning Division themselves wrote to the developers in early March saying that there's a lot of things in there that needs to be fixed. Especially Janelle was talking about the water contamination. The developers actually marked it as low concern, that water contamination is low concern. And so planning actually wrote back to the developers saying that you have to change this, you have to revise this and list it as high concern,
But of course.
because you listing it as low concern shows a complete disregard for the community. And so it's not just us raising this alarm. There are other, the planning division and their expertise have looked at these ESIAs and be like, this is not good enough. Your water quality assessment is not good enough for this project. But what we're also asking for and have been asking for from the very beginning is the proof that these rocks are the rocks for the airport, that these are the best quality rocks, that these are the densest rocks. We all are asking is for the proof of that. And when we got the ESIAs, we was like, okay, we're going to find out what rocks they are. It wasn't in there. There wasn't any data to show or prove that. And we've heard from the Prime Minister and other ministers. I think Mr. Johnson from the airport also stated that they have the data to back that these rocks have passed the tests for the airport to be used. We haven't seen that yet. So we're also asking for that as well. So we can read it because these were not included in the ESIA. So I think that's where we're at. We're still asking for information. Um,
Wow.
we're also hoping that planning division, the authorities in hand, make the right decision and not approve this project because we were given only 2 weeks to read this ESIS. It's over 800 pages just for Stonefield. Cropper Hall is another 300 plus pages, but we were focused on Stonefield. And to get through those 2 weeks, to read everything and then to write comments, we submitted 41 pages of comments, just our team, 41 pages. And there are other submissions by other experts. I think it was over 30 submissions to Physical Plan Division. I'm not sure if that's a regular thing that they get. I don't know how, on average, how much comments they get, but they got a J comments. And
Although
I,
all they did was flash it, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah,
they just released it for a fixed amount of time to the public.
yes, yes. They only, because we've been asking for this for months and they finally released it in March. And you only give us 2
2
weeks,
weeks.
2 weeks from Monday to Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. And we only allowed in the office. And that's the only time we get to read it. We also learned from the acting chief physical planner that when we asked him like why isn't these documents made accessible to the affected communities, like perhaps leave some copies in the Concord Primary School or inside with the Margaret Council or the Canada Council, something of that sort. He said that the board voted against that and that the documents be remained in Roseau in their office, which is completely does not benefit the affected community. And in fact, the notice for the ESIS was made in a newspaper, and not a lot of people pay attention to newspaper these days. So the notice was posted in the newspaper on a Tuesday, and we actually found out that it was posted in the newspaper on the Friday when we actually met with the chief planner. And he was like, yeah, you guys can get a chance to read documents on Monday. And we've put out the notice since Tuesday. I was like, where was this notice? And he's like, it's in the newspaper.
It's a secret, right? But doesn't the law say, about with public consultation, there must be parameters as to what public consultation should look like and a chance for the public to give feedback.
The
Yeah,
best practices allude to public consultation. It's a requirement of the ESIA process, actually, for you to be able to get the social aspects. You have to be able to confront and communicate with the community. Our laws are very archaic, but again, you're able to find pieces of the legislation that speaks to it. And thankfully, in 2024, Dominica ratified a regional agreement called the SKZOO Agreement. And what the SKZOO Agreement stands for is freedom of information when it comes to environmental matters, the right to be consulted prior to decision making, and also gives us the right for environmental justice and a safe space. It's supposed to guarantee us safety to be able to speak up on environmental matters. So there are pieces of legislation all over the place that speak to the right for consultation, speak to freedom of information. The physical planning division itself, I mean, is supposed to, by law, maintain a register and is supposed to provide all of this information that is in the register. So whatever is in the register is public record, and once it's requested, it's supposed to be released. If there's a fee associated for printing it or whatever, then the person pays that fee,
Hmm.
and then you get it and you do whatever. But what Gary, when he was talking about not having a copy in the Kalinago territory, we thought that was absolutely ridiculous, or in the Marigat community. These are the communities most affected by this. This is where a copy should be, and you're voting no against that. We had permission to take pictures of the pages of the ESIAs from the chief physical planner. we couldn't scan it, but we had permission to take
Take
pictures.
pictures.
So of course we do what the young people do, and take your word for it, but rebel at the same time. And we took pictures of every single page and put it online, and we printed out copies and put it in the communities that
Amazing.
should have
Wow.
access. Yeah, but then Gary and them got banned for they were no longer allowed to enter physical planning because they made a public document public. But anyways, shortly after that, Miss Annie Edwards won part of the initial case that she's also challenging physical planning on with the ESIA documents, but for the airport, where
Mhm.
the judge told physical planning that this is in law, stop wasting the time of the court and give people the documents that they deserve to be given and is written in law. So after that happened, we were no longer banned from physical planning. But to
Persona
go back
non
to
grata,
your
huh?
I know,
Go
to go back to your earlier question, on what can we do, we're at a point right now where everyone needs to recognize that we actually put in enough pressure to get a stop order in place. We actually put in enough pressure to get the ESIAs released, and Dominica hasn't seen ESIAs for any public project in a long time. And the reason we were able to get to this point is because every single one of our supporters stood up and added to this massive collective voice that was able to push it forward, push the community interest forward, push for environmental justice, push for social justice, and get us what we need. And now we're at a point where we have the ESIA documents. They're obviously, like Gary said, not good. they're,
ahead.
they're very not good. It was essentially written by AI. Like, we could clearly tell that the ESIAs were plugged into Chat GPT. They were very detailless, very human-less. It was very much so done
Wow.
by ChatGPT, which is probably why it was such of a poor document, because it was not fed enough information. But we are at a point where we now need everyone to put pressure on physical planning and the regulatory bodies that are there to protect the people, that are there to uphold our laws, to put them under the microscope, essentially, and to do what their job and the law mandates. Environmental health, for example, like looking at one of the comments in the chat,
Yeah.
it's been a month since we found out what was happening in the riverway with mercury and arsenic. Environmental health has never approached the community. There's been no national one, and this is essentially a national emergency, to have these levels in our riverway, and people are using it. People are still drinking from this river, bathing, constantly interacting, putting it on our crops. Like, we need to understand what's happening here. We need them to come in and test this river, do an independent study, and say, hey, these are the actual findings. This is what we're concerned about. This is how we move forward as a community to ensure your safety. It almost feels like they're sacrificing communities in Dominica without, lifting an eyebrow, without any care. But we're such of a small island, small population. Like, we're each other's neighbors. We're essentially all family. Like, I
Right.
mean, when you trace your lineage back, like, we're all cousins at the end of the day. Like, that's how small that we feel. So what we really need is, the continued help to keep pushing this through, to keep sharing, but to keep the pressure on, to reach out to, our representatives and the members of these public agencies and say, hey, this is not right. Lives come before anything else, and we need to protect our people first. Else, what's the point of this version of development if we sacrifice our own?
Yeah. And just to put a little context on it, in 1990, when I worked in Dominica as an engineer, um, for example, I was a project engineer on the project at the Deepwater Harbor, where we cordon off a portion of the ocean right there, and backfill to create a place to store containers. And we had a soils lab right there next to Public Works. And before we approved where the stuff was coming from to fill that area and to compact it, they had to bring samples to the soil lab, and they had to do all the tests, crush it, pass it through sieves, and create a profile to confirm that the material was suitable, it could compact properly, what the moisture content would be, and so on. Similarly, when we did the cruise ship berth at Portsmouth, at Cabritz, that's also a project I did. I was a project engineer on that project. Um, Similarly, we had to vet, basically approve the source of the material beforehand, not after the fact, so that the contractor would know that he cannot bring equipment to a site or spend money in an area until he knows that the material coming from that area had gotten approval. And that was in 1990, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we are 36 years down the road, and they seem to have thrown all of those checks and balances out of the window. Um, People used to be afraid of forest guards more than they were afraid of the police because our foresters were serious. Um, and hunters with guns on their back would tremble if they're in the forest and a forest guard comes up to them and they're not sure that they are doing something in violation in the forest reserves and that sort of thing. It was a story that they would come back and tell us in the village because they were so scared when they encountered that forest guard because we guarded those things jealously. And people, I mean, there was almost no need for enforcement for not hunting outside of the hunting season and all of that. I mean, the reason I'm saying that is that our people have been uneducated because we used to know those things, right? If somebody wants to do a fowl cage or a pig pen in their yard, the environmental health officer had to come and see where the water would go. When on a Saturday they're washing down their pen and it has excrement from the whatever animals they were in, they would have to show where that water is going to make sure it's not going directly to a river or it's going into somebody else's property. And I mean, those are what is to obtain in Dominica. And it seems as though there is an uneducation of our people. Um, there was also on a higher level the Dominican Association of Engineers. And the intent of that was that if folks come to Dominica and I say I'm an engineer, then present your credentials. What makes you an engineer before you can practice engineering in Dominica? So somebody cannot just show up and say that they're an environmental engineer and go do an ASIA. I mean, somebody should have to vet them and say, yes, this person presented their credentials, and we know so somebody doesn't even know geographic information systems, and they're doing an EIA or whatever it is. So we were there 30, 40 years ago, and you wonder what's happening. But the bright light is that we have folks like Janelle and Gary that's re-educating the younger folks and reminding the older folks what 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 should be happening and that we know how to do it correctly. We've done it correctly for decades. We should be improving, not regressing. And so, folks, what I would like to encourage you to do is, if you if you are not familiar with it, please become familiar. I have a lot of Gary's videos on my Facebook page. There are also a lot of footage on Wave Facebook page, and I give Gary and Janelle the opportunity to also tell you how you can find out about their work because they're doing more than Daywash. Daywash is the big elephant in the room right now, but they're doing more than Daywash. But of course, the pressure that needs to be brought to bear. I'm happy to hear that there was some 30 odd people who submitted comments to physical planning after the ESIA was released, and we can do it. And this is what these two young people are proving, that even though it looks like we may be powerless, use your voice, use your presence, and do it relentlessly. And you will be surprised how much something that looked immovable will actually move. And they have proven that. I'm going to give you guys, because it's almost an hour and a half, 90 minutes. I'm going to give you, both of you, the opportunity to just make some closing remarks. There may be stuff that I didn't get a chance to ask you, or you think would be relevant for the public to know. This is the opportunity, or if it's just to recap, summarize. Um, we Janelle went first when we were opening, so Gary, I'm going to let you go first this time. Let's wrap the conversation and bring it to a close.
Okay, sorry, I was muted for a bit. My dogs are going wild outside. I think
I hear them
tired,
barking. This sound
they're
good.
tired of hearing me talk about their bosh. Ho ho ho. Um, yes. So, final remarks. Yes, we're still standing strong. In what we're doing. We're very resilient, if you want to use that. But you could follow us on our Facebook page or Instagram page at Save the Wash. We also have now our website, savethewash.org, and there you'd find all our content as well. And also, you said on your website, I think it
On
was
my Facebook page, I have your
your
videos
Facebook
as
page,
well.
yeah, all our videos are there as well. But on the Facebook page, we not only just share the videos, we also share like documents,
Hmm.
which not a lot of people are paying attention for, because you got to read for everything. But those are interesting in the topic. Like I encourage you to read those, especially like we got the application documents for this. We got all the ESIAs. We've also have a Proton drive, and this drive has everything that we've done so far, and everything is listed, is categorized. We have the different laws, and when you go into the different laws of Dominica, we have actually highlighted the sections that is important for this case, and we've also included all media related to Deboash, and that's not just our media, but it's media from other socials, like especially press releases that we've heard from the different ministers and stuff like that. Any mention of Dewash, we try to document everything within those folders,
Hmm.
so those are not lost, and we can always go back and quote those happenings. What else? I forgot to mention. Um, oh, we also had a petition early on in December, and we've got over 4,600 signatures on that petition. And we've seen people sign from all over the world. So the Dominicans all over the world were seeing this going on, and people are concerned about it. And we have seen people come to Deboash and basically supported us, coming there just curious, haven't picked a side yet, but they just came to listen and actually seeing the damage themselves, and actually hearing our appeal to them. They realize, hey, this is wrong. Like people before have came to Debash and not realize how close it is to the river. They thought we were exaggerating the proximity to the river. They were exaggerating the size of it, and thinking that we're too emotional about the situation. But when they see it themselves, they're like, oh, this is crucial. This is crucial. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention before we close is that although the river doesn't look like Labu all the time, it could still be contaminated.
Right.
Just because we're not seeing it muddy like how it was in October and November doesn't mean that it's not dangerous. The Anybody who grew up in Concord knows how the river looks when it overflows and how it gets dirty. However, when we get rainfall like we've seen over the past few days, the past week, when there's a lot of rain in Daywash, a lot of the filthy runoff comes from the quarry site, and it goes into the river, and causes a mess. Anywhere above the quarry site, it's clean. The water's a little heavier, but it's clean. but below the side, that's where it gets dirty, and that's when it gets into the village, and that's when it's a mess. And so that's what we're seeing. And we've also seen they've tried to do some mitigation measures by putting
That's what you call
gabion, okay, they did something. They put gabion baskets where the water will naturally flow. And we've seen the power of water, the water just push it aside or the
yeah.
seep through it, and it's still getting into the river. So I think that's some of my final words. But yeah, thank you for having us on your show. Don't forget to follow us. We're most active on our Facebook and our Instagram. Everything first that we post on is on those pages.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gary did a very great job summing it up. So thank you for that. The only thing I have to add to it, Anthony, is we are leading this movement the way we expect to be led. Right. We are doing this with as much transparency as possible, with much accountability, and we are only putting out information that we can prove. So everything that goes into our video, everything that goes into our comment documents, into our social media posts, there's a team of people that most people are not seeing who are behind us. There's a lot of young people, there's a lot of people from all generations, from all walks of life who are behind us. But there's a core team of young people who constantly review what we're doing, constantly fact check, making sure this is, you know, in with the public interest first, with the benefit of the community first and foremost. And it's as balanced and as neutral as possible. And we hope by leading it in a non-violent, in a transparent, in a accountable way, in a trusting way, in a community first, nature first way, that is how we will be met. Because I think we're at a point of our generations understand what we stand to lose, right? We've grown up constantly hearing about climate change, constantly feeling the temperature rise and our skin burn, and hearing the stories of our parents and grandparents and what resources used to exist in Dominica before, right? Like, I mean, we are one of the lucky few in our generation who have been able to see a mountain chicken because of the work that we do at Crapo, who have been able to see us this through in the wild.
Mm.
And when we hear about the stories on, how crabs used to be such an abundance and you all used to go to the river and do these things, or you'll be in the sea and stingrays will be at your feet, or there'll be starfish on the shore. When we hear these things and then we grow up and we look and we're like,
Yeah,
where?
these are
Why
lost in
was
just
this
one
robbed
generation.
from us? Exactly. Why was that robbed from us? Why can't we experience the beauty of that Dominica? And so we're at this point where we're like, no, we need to put our foot down because we see how we are spiraling into a space where, like, I mean, the generations after us now, and we are soon no longer going to be the youth. We are soon going to be the ones who the young up and coming people look at and be like, why didn't you do better? Why didn't you do something about this? Why didn't you think about our future? And our safety and our survival. So we're at this point of feeling that towards those who came before and seeing those coming now and being like, we need to be that bridge. We need to finally put our foot down and be like, enough is enough. Our communities matter, our mother nature matters, and we just need to figure out how to redefine development so it doesn't sacrifice anybody at the end of the day.
Redefine development. Um, I- and that's what I think would be a very good outcome of all of this activity, that folks can really understand that we're not talking about either or. We're not talking about mountains or development. We're talking about using our brain, because we have very, very smart people in Dominica. They, I mean, everywhere you go and you find Dominicans, they are high achieving, but they have not been allowed to excel in their own country. And so if we can provide an environment where our young people can apply their expertise, like these two young people here, in all of the various fields, uh, we could have development and still keep what is sacred to us. We could rebuild. There are still crabs in the wild. If we preserve them, they will come back to where when there's rain, we see crabs in our yard. All of those things are possible, but like Janelle said, we have to redefine we what we consider to be development. We cannot try to turn Dominica into a Dubai. Dominica is not suited to be a Dubai. Dubai exists in desert, in a sand, and so what is priority to them can never be priority to us. And so development is not just shiny and humongous and concrete. Development can be redefined in a Dominican context that takes into account what it means to be Dominican and what it is that we want to preserve and what it is that we want to pass on to our future generations. And so, young people, you give us courage. We are supposed to be the one giving you courage, but you give me courage. And as you said, you guys are the tip of the spear. There's a lot more in the back of you that's under you, that's undergirding and supporting all of what you do. And so for everybody who has contributed to that, um, I think we have averted disaster. If as bad as it looks, from the conversation we've had tonight, I think most people will agree that so far we have averted disaster. We're not safe yet because there's still so many forces pushing to continue with what they're doing. But even like the idea that they've crossed out the 80 acres and bring it all the way down to like what 16 or whatever it is, that is a sign that even they are trying to understand that the scale is too wide. Um, but imagine if this movement did not happen,
Mm-hmm.
what we would be having with the rains that just fell. So, thank you so much for keeping us in the fight and keeping something that we could fight for. But, folks, you cannot leave it just for them to do. It's on all of us to find out what's going on, become familiar with it, and raise our voices. I think most of us would agree that what is going on in Debush is unnecessary. If if the reason for what is going on is to get aggregate for the airport, it's not necessary because Dominica has no shortage of supply of construction material that is cheaper because all you have to do is pay transportation and maybe buy it from quarries. Government in the laws, the government have a right to go into areas and extract material for public development projects. So all of those things could be applied. Um, if the excuse or the reason they give is that it's for the airport, then 100% it's not necessary to be in Debush doing any of those activities that's happening. And if it's for any other reason, 1,000% that it's not needed. There is no reason under the sun to to justify what is happening at Debush. Not to supply material to the airport, not to mine, not to build a hotel. There is no reason that can that can produce anything that's more valuable than the value that is already there in the mountain and in the rivers and in the trees and the preservation of our water catchment areas and all of that. If we sum all of that and put a value on it, there is nothing that can come out of the quarrying of Debush that is more valuable than what we have there right now. And that has to sink in. Because when we hear that they're already encroaching on the forest reserves and the national park, I mean, those were set in place and it preserved that area for decades. Why do we want to go in now? It's like you've been saving money all of these decades and then all of a sudden you figure you want to just go take the money and spend it when it's not necessary, it's not an emergency, it's not critical. Let's continue to save it. And so Gary and Janelle, thank you so much for agreeing to come on my show. I am super, super honored. And thank you so much for being, bright beacons and demonstrative of what our young people are aspiring to. What you guys are doing is world class, definitely world class. And so we're very proud and very grateful. And I could have no better project on Earth Day than to have the two of you on. So thank you very, very much. And Godspeed to
Thank
you.
you. Thank
And,
you.
and I admire you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That I was saying, follow us on our pages because we have more things we're planning for the
Mhm.
future. So if you want to keep updated, you can follow us on our Facebook or Instagram. That's the best place to
Do,
continue following us.
do you guys have a way that if somebody wants to support you guys financially that they can make contributions? Or would that be to
Yeah.
waive? You do? Go ahead and yeah.
Well, so we at this moment, yes, if people want to make donations, they can reach out to us. That's not a problem. You can reach out
Mhm.
to our page or our Proton email, safetybash@proton.me. But what we especially value more than financial contributions is technical contributions, right? Because we are not Josiah Benoit. We know that we are not experts in absolutely every field on this planet. Gary and I, ecologists, there are also other technical expertise on our team, but there's still so many gaps that we have. And we've only been able to get so far and have our understanding be this great because people from all different experiences and all different skill sets have come together to paint that picture and help build that understanding. So if people really want to support, we greatly value the networks, we greatly value your technical skills, your suggestions, just however you can contribute your time. Just showing up more than anything else is really what we need at this point.
Right. I saw a comment from Billy Sanderson, and I will tell you that the very, very first video that I saw that I learned that there was work going on in Dearmarsh was a video that Billy Sanderson made. He was driving past the area, and it just looked awful to him, and he just turned on his phone and made a video and said, "Look at what is happening there. These guys are mad. They're crazy." And that's the first video that I saw, and then I saw. So that's when that actually placed it in context for me, for when I saw Gary's video the first time. Well, the first one was just talking about the history, but the second one, I placed it in context because I remembered that video from Billy Sanderson. I'm just saying that because there are so many people who are fighting that fight, and and don't be disheartened, guys. There's a lot of folks who are rooting for you and supporting you. All right. So good night.
Good night, and thank
Good
you so
night.
much for your
You-
time and for your listeners and sharing space.
You're very welcome. It's a
Good
pleasure.
night.
My pleasure. Good night, folks.
Good night.
All right. So, folks, this is what we talk about when we talk about young people. Um, we educate them, and we hope that they come back with this with the education. Um, but when they come back, we have to give them the space so that they can develop. I mean, essentially, this area was saved by Wave. Margot and Afi and those people and those guys in Wave. They've been doing safaris for a couple of years now. The Wednesday walkers. I don't want to get into calling names because there's so many people who contribute into that fight, but it is. But all of those folks are older like me, so it's really heartening to see the younger people standing up, and it's appropriate because what we're destroying is their inheritance. You know, it might be our legacy, but it's their inheritance that we are destroying. And so today, April 22nd, 2026, Earth Day. Let us take a pause and be grateful for the planet Earth. When you hear these astronauts come from outer space and they talk about Earth, I mean, this little speck in the galaxy, in the Milky Way, which is one of several galaxies. So we just have that one little speck, and we should do our best to protect it. We should show our gratitude for all the gifts that we find on earth. Everything, isn't it amazing that everything we need exists on this one little speck? So, but it's not infinite. It is definitely, everything is not rebuildable. Folks say, well, we had Hurricane Maria and Tropical Storm Erica that destroyed so much of our forest and it grew back. That in itself is not true, because if you go to the forest, you will see a different makeup until the trees come back in full force. As I said, you see Zeb Kutu and those kind of bush that comes back after the trees are gone. And not one, and also you cannot compare a hurricane which crashes trees onto the surface. The trees rot and they provide manure and regenerate whatever is regenerated, to an excavator going in and digging. And so we have so many folks who are just malicious, and who, for whatever reason, you know, support a narrative, maybe a political narrative or whatever it is they support. And so they contort themselves. I saw Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson, he said, I have to mention that. He said in an interview that the the permission that we're saying that the developers are supposed to seek before starting, because government of Dominica is the client of the developer, it's as if government is asking government for permission to do a project on behalf of government. Um, and I thought that was unfortunate, that a professional, supposed to be a professional engineer or project manager, whatever he is, could even construct that type of sentence, much less to repeat it. And then he went further to liken it to his illustration is that it's as though you come to your house and you're asking yourself permission to use your own kitchen to make a cup of tea for yourself. So at that point, those are not conversations you want to have, because those are not thoughts that are genuine. Because I don't think that he believed it himself. Um, but it's difficult when you don't have fidelity to the truth. Your fidelity is to a person or to a certain position, and then you have to be a contortionist to try to maintain those positions. And so, folks, I hope you agree with me that this was a wonderful program, a wonderful interview, conversation with these two young people, and help us to get beyond that, so we can see some true development in Dominica that doesn't sacrifice the treasures for certain lesser um, projects. So, folks, with that, I want to say good night and thank you to everybody who who contributed to tonight's program. It's Earth Day. One of our staff's birthday is tomorrow, almost Earth Day, so happy birthday to you. And next week, we will be back with another episode of this speaking interview. In the meantime, stay strong and keep the struggle. Good night.